Welcome back to the Tanya class. We finished last week chapter 13, and today we'll go into chapter 14. Before I do that, I would like to go back to something that the Alter Rebbe discussed in chapter 12. And that is the Alter Rebbe's doctrine that Me'ach Shalit al Alev. The Alter Rebbe said in chapter 12 that the mind rules the heart. The mind is simply stronger than the heart. And we discussed what that means. And why is it that by most of us, we don't feel that the mind overpowers the heart? Sometimes our heart overpowers the mind. What does it mean that the mind overpowers the heart? So you have two forces within you. You have the godly soul in the mind. You have the animalistic drives in the heart. And when these two are battling it out with each other, the heart wants one thing and the mind knows that it's wrong and it should be focused on something else. The mind automatically, by nature, rules the heart. So why is it that by us, when we have this struggle, a lot of times the heart overpowers the mind? We asked that question. And one answer I gave was, which is the one I focused on, is that we don't even to begin with get involved in the battle. You remember we said that sometimes the mind doesn't even get into the arena to battle it out. Okay. I want to present another perspective on this today, after much thought. And it goes as follows. When we say, let's try to analyze what's really going on within our psyche, in our mind, in our heart, and where's the battle? Who's battling who? The godly soul, we know that we have two souls, the godly soul and the animalistic soul, the human soul as we call it. And those two are pulling in two different directions, opposite directions. The godly soul is pulling in the direction of pure godliness. Everything you do and everything you think and everything you say should be directed, and everything you feel should be directed towards God's end, a godly end. The animalistic soul is pulling in a direction of self-centeredness. Got it. We understand that. With Alter Rebbe also said that the godly soul's seat is the mind and the right side of the heart, whereas the animal soul is in the left side of the heart, right? So basically it's the mind versus the heart. Okay, the heart is the animalistic drives and passions and desires, the self-centered cravings, and the mind is the place where the godly soul is taking, his opinion. That's the place of the godly soul. So in the Beinani, the Alter Rebbe says, in the Beinani, he's able to get mastery over his thought, speech, and action because the mind rules the heart. What goes on in a regular, average person's heart? We all know. The heart of the animalistic soul is drawn in every which direction of self-centered cravings, passions, temptations. How about the mind? Where is the mind drawn? Where is our mind drawn? To godly ends? Is that a fact? Huh? So let me give you an example. Let me cite an example. So a parable so you can understand what I'm trying to say there. Basically what I want to say is that the reason our mind doesn't rule our heart is because our mind is also part of our heart. Our mind is also not a good mind. What do I mean by that? Let me give you an example. A person marries another person. Two people, a man and a woman, get married. They very strongly love each other, committed to each other. They become one. When they get married, when they first get married, they're standing under the chuppah. There's this magic between them. The husband or the wife cannot even contemplate being drawn to someone else. It's out of the question. But could it happen that 10 years later a person should not be drawn to someone else? You shouldn't have a desire for someone else other than your spouse? Could happen. Could happen. Possible. You see a nice looking person, a nice looking, yeah, your eyes are drawn to it. You know, that's. If I told you, if God came down to you while you're standing under the chuppah, when you're really passionately in love with your spouse, and He gave you the offer, He said, I can now change your heart forever. That you should never ever have any desire to any other person other than this person standing next to you under the chuppah. In other words, I alter your heart. You should never have a desire for anyone else. Your mind shouldn't even work that way anymore. That when you see another person, not interested. What would you say? Would you opt to take that option, or would you say, leave me alone? Let me just be. If God said, I can do it now, you'll never have any challenges. Never have another challenge in your life regarding other people. When you look at another woman, you'll say, forget about it, this is ugly to me. You look at another man, it's ugly to me. Would you choose that God should take away that human aspect within you and say, I'm only for this person, that's it? Or you say, let me just be, I'll deal with these issues myself. What would you say?
Under the chuppah, you probably say yes.
Honestly, what would you say?
Well, under the
you don't
chuppah,
have to, it's not about you.
Yeah,
What do you think most people would say?
I'm thinking under the chuppah, somebody would say yes. That moment.
Yeah.
But in general, no, you would say, let me deal with it, because you don't know what life.
Because you don't want, no, not because who knows if I'll get tired of her. He tells you like this. As long as you're married to her, you won't have any desire for anyone else. The minute you divorce, you'll revert back to normal. What would you say then? It's a theoretical, a hypothetical, obviously. God's not giving us that choice. But if He did, that every time you look at another female, it's abhorrent to you. Would you want that?
Yeah.
Do you think most people would say yes?
No, most people would say no.
Why?
Because the people still want to have other desires or other.
Make choices.
What does that tell you? What does that tell you? I know it's completely hypothetical, but what does that tell you? It's not that, you see, let me use, let me tell you why I'm giving you this example. Let's go back to the Nefesh Elikis, the godly soul, the Beinin. Let's talk about the Beinin. Or the regular person, yeah? Our godly soul wants God. No question about that. The God has no interest in anything else. Our human soul wants pleasure. Wants self-centered pleasures, the temptations, all those things. The Alter Rebbe says the mind rules the heart, right? Mm-hmm. The heart wants everything that's ungodly. The mind wants everything that's godly. Is that true? If you came to Yid today, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, if you came to, before I go to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, what does it mean that that the mind, saying there's a battle between the godly soul, the mind, and the heart? The godly soul is drawn in every which direction. The godly soul is drawn in the animal soul is drawn to passions and temptations of the worst level, of the worst kind.
Sorry.
The godly soul is, the animal soul is drawn in every which direction to temptation. The godly soul is pulled, which is in the mind, is totally directed towards God. That's by a normal Beinani. Such a person, the mind rules the heart. What happens if I told you, we talk about the Beinani, yeah? He has these struggles between good and evil, between good, the godly, and the self-centered. Imagine God came to you, middle of Yom Kippur, when you're really excited about Hashem. And He said to you, I'm going to give you an offer, and you can now either take it or leave it. I can rip out of your heart every desire for anything that's ungodly. You'll never desire it again. Would you accept that? You would?
Yes.
So let me explain what that means. What that means is you're no longer drawn to good food because it's tasty. You're no longer drawn to anything that is ungodly. Imagine that. You have no interest ever again for anything that's ungodly. You want food because you have to be healthy. But you have no interest in anything that is not pure godliness. Towards God, towards a godly end. Would you say yes to that?
I would.
You would?
Yes.
What do you think most people would say?
Most people would say no.
That means like this, you don't have any more desire to go to a restaurant. You'll never have a desire to go to a good movie. You have no, it's all out of your system. It's all out of your system. That's godliness. That's godly. That's good. That's good. Those are good desires. Those are godly. Those are very good.
You can't enjoy Shabbat dinner?
You can,
Yeah.
you can enjoy a God Shabbat dinner, but you're never interested in the good chicken soup. That's not your interest.
You eat
That's
Shabbat
not your
dinner
interest.
for
Your interest
Shabbat.
is not because the chicken soup tastes good. Your interest is because you're serving God through this. So you want to have a Shabbos and make Kiddush and do the whole thing as God wants it. But you no longer have any interest ever in anything God. You have no interest in sightseeing. You have no interest in any of this because it's all self-centered. How many people do you think would accept such a proposal?
Most would not.
No.
I would say most would not.
So what does that tell
I
you?
don't think I would either.
So the battle is not between your mind and your heart. Your mind is not in the right place. Your mind is also part of your heart. If I'm telling you on an intellectual level, I can set you straight, and you don't want it. It means your mind is corrupt. Your mind is not interested in godliness. Your mind is interested in the pleasures of this world. It's not only your heart, it's your mind is messed up. You know what it says, a dog? You know what a dog is called in Hebrew? Kelev, right? Maza Kelev. What's Kelev? Kulo lev. The word is made up of kulo lev. It's all heart. It's all heart. Even his head is part of his heart. Most of us are like that. We don't want, if God, it's a hypothetical obviously, God's not giving us that choice, and that's the tragedy of the real Beinani, is that God doesn't give him that choice. A Beinani would love that. A Beinani would accept that. If God came to a Beinani in the middle of the night and told him, I can settle it once and for all for you, you can be a tzaddik tonight, he would say, absolutely. You know why we wouldn't? Why wouldn't we want to do that? Why wouldn't you want to do that?
Because I think I want a choice. You know, I'm
It doesn't
to do
mean,
the right thing.
that doesn't mean God took away. Do you think that tzaddik doesn't have a choice? You think tzaddikim don't have freedom of choice? It's on a different level. They choose now between different things.
Well, they're more focused, like
It's not only more focused. The choice is no longer between me and God. It's within godliness alone. It's
just
so they have choice. A tzaddik can also become a non-tzaddik, which I think we spoke about that before. But why do you think people wouldn't? I'll tell you a story. There was a chassid, his name was Rabbi Yisroel Lepler. He was a chassid of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe, 200 years ago. No, less, 180 years ago. Okay. One day, he was a chassid he was a Beinani, maybe even a tzaddik. He was a tremendous, passionate Yid. He wanted only one thing in his life, God. That's all he wanted. Rebbe, Chassid is God, that's all he wanted. But he had a Yetzer Hara. He wasn't a tzaddik. At one point, when he felt that his heart still wanted other things, so he ran into the Rebbe's room once in his passion, when he was in the middle of his davening, I guess, in his trance, he was really excited about something he was just learning, and he ran into the Rebbe's room and said, Rebbe, hack mir up the linke Seite. Chop off my left side. He meant the chol hasmoli. He meant the left side of the heart, where all the bad. He says, chop it off. Get rid of it for me already. He wanted that. He was looking to change who he was. When you say, you give me a choice, should I take away from you now all your desires for pleasures? We say the mind is battling the heart. The mind is not battling the heart. The mind is a heart. By us, the mind is hard. The mind doesn't want to really be but doesn't want to be entirely godly oriented. I'm telling you, if I asked you, when I ask you, I mean your mind. I'm talking to your brain. I'm talking about a conscious question, on the conscious level. This is a matter of the brain. The brain can now choose to get rid of desires, all the desires in the heart, for negative things, for unholy things. And the brain says, no, I don't want it. Why? Because the brain is also part of this world. So when we say in chapter 12, the mind rules the heart, that's only if the mind is like the Beinoni, which wants only godliness, and he's stuck nebuch with a heart that wants other things. In that case, the mind is always stronger than the heart. But by most of us, the mind is part of the heart. The mind is not a mind. You understand what I'm saying? The mind wants unholy things, not just the heart. So of course the mind is not going to rule the heart. The mind is part of the heart. So when I asked before in chapter 12, why is it if the mind is so strong and it rules the heart, why do we always succumb? Why does the heart always win by us? Not always, but a lot of times. Because our mind is a heart. There's also part of the heart reality. It's kulei lev. It's all heart. There's no part of you that's not really... That doesn't mean you have freedom of choice, and we'll learn now in chapter 14, even though you still have the power to say no to certain desires. As we many times do. It's not that we're always going to succumb to the negative. Sometimes there's certain aspects of our life that we know better, and we say no. And every day we try to become a little better in that aspect. Well, the reason we don't rule our heart is not because... It's not because the mind doesn't rule the heart. It's because the mind is not a mind by us. The mind is not a healthy mind. By us, the mind also wants garbage. You know what it means that a tzaddik is, it's a transformed human being. It's a different kind of human being. So if I took away the desires of your heart, if the Eibishter God would tell you, I'm ready to take it away, it's kind of like he's saying, I'm taking away a part of your human experience, a part of what it means to be a human, to desire good food, to desire good pleasures and so on. No, I'll take it away from you. Most people would say, no, I want to be human. Let me deal with those struggles. And in that case, it's going to be a big struggle. Sometimes you'll win, sometimes you won't, because the mind is not either where it should be. You follow what I'm saying? Me'ach shalat al alev of the Alter Rebbe is by the Beinoni. The Beinoni is a person that wants only godliness. In his mind, he's right. His mind is okay. His heart is not. But by most of us, the mind is not either okay. We don't even want to get rid of our desires of the heart. On the mind level, we don't want. So we're wondering why the mind doesn't win the heart. The mind is the heart. It's kulei lev. It's like a dog. Understand? But the Beinoni who does want to get rid of the desires of the heart, the Beinoni absolutely wants to get rid of desires of the heart. He's stuck nebuch with the desires of the heart. Can you say that you feel stuck with your heart? Nebuch, I want good food and I'm drawn to good pleasures. No one thinks that way. You don't see yourself that way. The Beinoni thinks of himself. He sees himself that way. His mind is focused on God. And unfortunately has to deal with a reality within him, which is in the left side of his heart, which pulls him in every which direction, which he can't stand. It drives him crazy. He wish it wasn't there. Rabbi Yisroel, when he went to the tzemach and said, hack me up, chop me off the left side, he meant it. We don't want to get rid of our left side. Even the mind doesn't want to get rid of our left side. Not only our heart. Our mind doesn't want to get it. Rabbi Yisroel, his mind wanted to get rid of his left heart. So in such a person, the mind rules the heart. Because his mind is right and his heart is wrong, the mind is going to rule the heart. But if we don't even want to get rid of the left side of the heart, our minds are corrupt. Our minds are not interested in godliness all the time. It's not only the heart, the mind is also like that. It's kulei lev, it's all heart. Your whole existence is one big heart. Even your mind, like an animal. Of course, over there, the mind's going to rule the heart. The mind is not a heart, it's not a mind. The mind is also a heart. So that's a different story.
So the sample that you get.
How do you like that, right?
The sample that
Very
you
deep.
get-
Yeah, we're all hard to finish, you're like a dog, yeah.
To take all those desire, basically it's tzaddik. You don't have
That's a
desire
tzaddik,
for
exactly.
It's a tzaddik.
So the Beini would love to become a tzaddik. Would you? In your state right now, would you love to become a tzaddik? If God gave you that gift, He said, I can take away every desire you have from this world, would you want that?
You throw a pump.
And if,
It's tough.
it's a tough question. It's a very tough
It's a
question.
very tough question.
Yeah.
It's a tough question.
Right.
It's like the example I gave before, so you can relate to it more. If God gave you, when you got married, He came to you in the middle of the night and said, I can now take away from your heart every desire for any other human being in the world. You should look at you as a man. Anytime you look at any other woman other than your wife, it's abhorrent to you. And to the wife, he says, every time you look at another man, it's abhorrent to you, as long as you're married to this man. Would you say yes to such a thing?
No,
No, why?
you can't walk around being.
No, that's not that it's going to be, you'll feel sick. No, that's not what we're talking about. They should really not, he should take away from you the desire for all other human beings. Should never have a challenge. I have a feeling that most people would say to God, you stay out of it, I'll deal with my challenges.
I don't know.
So maybe when it comes to marriage, we understand that it's so important that maybe we would take that gift from God. But if God came to you and said in the middle of the night, says, Marty, I see you struggling with your Yetzer Hara, I'm going to take away your desire for food, for self-centered food pleasures, self-centered sightseeing pleasures, any pleasure that's ungodly. I'm ready to rip it out of your heart. You'll never have it again. Would you say no to that?
I'm
Yes or
very
no?
tempted.
You would
I'm
say,
very tempted to say yes.
what would you, but would you? It means he's taking away a part of your human experience. It's taking away a part of your human experience.
But it's
Okay.
giving you
But if
something
it's-
so much more.
So
than-
yeah.
And what if you don't like
So
that
by the
experience?
tzaddik, he's talking giving you.
What is it you're telling me?
He's giving you a love of Hashem in place. A tzaddik transferred the pleasure, the desires for food and whatever else to godliness, to higher level thing, to pure godliness. But just to take away, our mind is not so quick to give up our human experience. It means the mind is part of the heart reality. Our mind doesn't want to give up the passions of the heart. It's not only the heart that has a problem. The mind is struggling with the heart. The mind is part of the heart. The mind, your conscious level, your consciousness doesn't want to give up your human, self-centered nature. It means, you know what I'm saying?
But I think everything that you like sightseeing, if you connect it to Hashem,
So that's a different kind of pleasure.
so you can
That's a
enjoy
different
it,
pleasure.
That's what
Different
we
pleasure.
love being in nature, and when I see it, I say beautiful creation of Hashem.
Fine.
When I eat the fruit, I
No
say
problem.
amazing taste, amazing beauty. And
What
I
has that got to do
relate-
with Hashem, the taste? That God made the
Abriya
taste?
Shelo, Yes.
Okay, so if that's how you're eating, you're on a different level. If that's how your eating is, then you're on a higher level. There's no question about that. Most people, when they crave food, it's not because God made such a nice world and they therefore want to taste God's world. That's not what they're thinking. That palate is interested now in a good pizza. Has nothing to do with God. By most people. Or ice cream or steak or whatever it is.
But what-
It's not about God.
what
They're not
about
saying,
the-
wow, I want this steak because this
You
is
know-
God's creation. Most people don't think that way.
These-
And once you're into godliness like that, where it's all about God, you're no longer interested in the taste of the steak. You're not interested in the taste of the steak. Why? Godliness is not in the taste. There's nothing godly about the taste.
The taste
What's
of
godly
fruit.
about it? The taste
I
of
think
food.
it's
How does that connect you to God? If you want to make a bracha, you say, I want to eat because I want to make another blessing. It's an opportunity for another blessing. That's not taste. That's because you want to make a blessing. What the attraction to good steak is usually not about God.
you-
Steak.
Or any food, or a vegetarian steak.
Veggie burger. The slippery slope here comes when you think of the following. You brought up some very interesting points. They all have to do with our animal soul.
Yeah.
Urge to reproduce, urge to eat, urge to drink, urge for housing, whatever it is, urge to dominate other people, perhaps, whatever it is, But there's another dimension which always bothered me, and I can't answer this question for many years. I firmly believe that things in themselves around, there's no beauty in things themselves. The beauty is in how you perceive them in your brain. This appreciation for beauty has no animal soul function whatsoever. Most animals don't have it, in my opinion, and it does not increase your ability to survive in nature or to survive and reproduce and all this kind of stuff.
Give me an example.
An example. I get a perfect example, and I once had this discussion. Someone thought that beauty is that you find beautiful things that help you live. And I asked them, have they ever been to the rim of the Grand Canyon? There is no more hostile looking, forbidding looking, dry, anti-life place on the face of the earth, but it is spectacularly beautiful. People are spellbound. They could sit there for days and look at it, This thing that God put in our mind has nothing to do with the rocks of the Grand Canyon. It's what God implanted in our brain to find beautiful. Now, why does he make beauty in our brain? One reason. There's only one possible reason that we should find things beautiful. It's to make us happy. He wants us to have the pleasure in beauty, period. He gave that to us as a gift, period. It serves no evolutionary purpose, no biological purpose. It's pure and simple, something that to make us happy. And in appreciating that, when you said to become a tzaddik, all of these things that you mentioned are things that have to do with your animal soul. But let's say Hashem said...
One second,
let me just finish this thought. Let's say Hashem said, I will immediately now take away your appreciation for music. When you hear a Rachmaninoff concerto, you're going to hate it, you'll want to vomit and all this kind of stuff.
No, I didn't say that.
Hang on. If he wanted to take that away, so that all you had was God, I would disagree that that's what he would want the tzaddik to do. I think a tzaddik would retain that, give up other things to do with his animal soul, but that has nothing to do with his animal soul.
What, good music?
Sure, hearing music or seeing beautiful painting or
if it's holy music,
or something
if
else.
It's holy music, he would want it. King David was very much into music, as we know. That was holy music. But Bach is not holy music, and nor is Mozart.
No, but they're not holy music. No. But how about listening to it?
So why are you listening to it? You are drawn to something exquisite, to a beautiful symphony.
And God
but I know, but it's a desire of which soul? Which soul do you think?
Not the animal soul.
It is the animal soul.
I'm
sure.
Sorry. The animal soul is there for a reason. It helps us biologically to live.
The animal soul is drawn to things that give it pleasure, no matter what it is. Sophisticated pleasure like music, or very base pleasure like going to the beach. And
the function, you have to ask yourself, what's the function of the pleasure?
Just to make me feel good.
No. If you had no pleasure in food, you wouldn't eat and you would die. If you had no pleasure in reproduction...
That's not true. The tzaddik doesn't die.
Tzaddik don't enjoy to eat pizza?
No, he does not. Has no such interest. No, he has no such interest. Those are not his interests. He eats because he has to eat.
He has Friday night dinner. His wife make for him chicken soup and meat and
he eats
rice.
He eats
it, but he don't enjoy from the.
What do you mean enjoy? He feels that it's a good taste.
You will not tell her next time. Listen. Next Friday.
No, he'll never tell her that. No, never.
No.
He has no interest in taste. That's not what. Of course, when he eats it and it tastes good, he's going to know it tastes good.
Right.
But he has no interest in taste. He's not going to tell us why. By the way, this didn't taste good. Could you do me a favor next week? Put in such a spice. Why would he do that? Where does that come from? Let's analyze that. It's a good question. Where would that need and want come from? The pleasure.
Right.
That he's not interested.
No.
That's self-centered pleasure. He has no interest in those things.
Here's I think the flaw in that argument. That's just another step above. What the tzaddik is going to do, though, if he hasn't eaten and he starts feeling hungry and weak and starting to feel really upset, because his blood sugar is down and all this kind of stuff, then he's going to want to eat.
Of course.
And when he eats, that's going to go away.
But that wasn't his question.
No, but wait a minute. This feeling that he had is going to go away. Relief of that feeling is a tremendous pleasure. and he cannot help it because his animal soul
True.
has driven him to eat so he doesn't die.
Right.
The same with drinking water.
It's the
I
same
don't
with,
like
you know,
water,
let
but
me
if I'm
give you
thirsty,
this
I'm gonna
most
drink a lot of
base,
water.
the strongest
Yeah.
pleasure, procreation.
Yeah.
Tzaddik has children.
Absolutely.
And he enjoys it. But that's because that's how we're created.
We understand
There's nothing
that.
you can do about that.
We
That's not what
understand
that is.
But that's-
But he'll never be drawn to it for its own sake.
Fine.
That's it.
But this procreation, for the necessity of procreation, to have children and obey a commandment, is animal soul driven. It is not the other side driven.
That's not true.
It is. Procreation
No.
is
A tzaddik wants to procreate because it's a mitzvah.
Right.
Yeah.
Fine. But that's that desire to, let's say if he wasn't interested in doing the mitzvah, he would still have an urge to procreate.
And he wouldn't do it.
Maybe not. I'm not talking about the action. I'm talking
No, he
about
no
the
longer
urge.
has the urge for its own sake. No, he doesn't. He's totally gotten rid of that. The tzaddik is abhorred by anything that's self-centered. It abhors him. He can't, that's no. It's the same thing with food. You think he has an urge for good, tasty food for its own sake? He doesn't.
No, he doesn't.
No.
He doesn't, but his animal soul...
You know why?
So he lives.
And this is where I want to get back. He has altered that desire for something for much stronger. Let me give you an example to put this a little bit better into perspective. Let's forget about a tzaddik, a bein. Let's talk about regular people like ourselves. Imagine you have a 17-year-old whose hormones are going crazy. He's a regular teenager. What's his interest? To have, physical pleasure of the opposite. He's into whatever, dating and this and having fun, right? And he's very much into, and you say it's your child, you say, my goodness, there's other things in this world. Become a mensch. What's wrong with you? You be focused on better things. This kid now becomes older, or you say a kid has desires for food, he's into his steak, he's into his food the whole day, that's his interest. And you can somehow get him, you say, come with me to a good concert, where you're going to have a opera singer, or a good symphony and so on. And he goes with you and he says, that was nice. And you buy him musical CDs so that he can get more into that and less into his real base garbage desires. And you, little by little, you get him away from that. He becomes a little more sophisticated in what he desires, right? So he no longer is drawn to these base, silly desires of another pizza and another whatever. And he has a sophisticated pleasures. He understands the pleasure of good music. He understands the pleasure of reading a good book that's interesting. Everyone would say that's a better situation than the first, right? You want your children to be... Does it mean that he no longer has self-centered pleasures? No. He certainly does have self-centered pleasures, but they're not a little more sophisticated, right? The tzaddik, he's doing the same thing, but it's going from self-centered to God-centered pleasures. He still has a tremendous desire. He has great desire. The tzaddik has tremendous desires, but not for himself, for God. He has graduated. To him, a symphony is a silly desire. What are you doing? How could you get carried away with music if you can have God? Why would you take music over God? He doesn't understand that. So just like you, a person that understands music, you look at the 30-year-old that's laying on the beach all day, and you say, how could you give up sophisticated a Mozart symphony or a Beethoven or going to the Museum of Art, of Medieval Art and so on, beautiful stuff, and this guy is looking at whatever. All he's interested in is the most base desires. He's never graduated from it. You can't understand him. You can't relate to this boy, right? It's not that you don't have you're also self-centered. You're not self-centered. Of course you're self-centered. You're looking for pleasures. It's just that your pleasure's on a higher level. Or you think it's on a higher level. It probably is on a higher level. And the hierarchy of pleasures, the intellectual pleasure, music pleasure, is much higher than base pleasure of the flesh. The way you look at this teenager or this 30-year-old that's into his pleasures of the flesh is the way the tzaddik looks at you. He can't understand how you can be drawn to something other than God. There's nothing more pleasurable than God. So what the tzaddik did was he transferred his pleasure from the physical, from the animalistic side purely to God. And anything animalistic makes him sick. But when we're talking about the Beinoni, God giving you the option, I'll take away the pleasures of your heart. You will no longer have to deal with your Yetzer Hara. And most people would say no. Why? Because they're not aware of a greater pleasure. They don't know about the greater pleasure. The Beinoni is aware of a greater pleasure because he loves Hashem. But he also has this side of him, and he doesn't know what to him it's a tremendous hindrance. Does good food hinder your service of God? Your attraction to good food? Do you find that it could be a distraction to your service to Hashem?
No.
No?
No.
How could you say that?
Why would you say that?
Because you don't think that... how about your attraction to good movies? Do you think that could be a distraction to your service to Hashem?
Yeah.
You do. Why?
Yeah.
Explain why.
Because when I'm into the movie, I'm not into Hashem.
And when you're into your food, you're not either into Hashem.
You can. I mean, that's what we have at shul when we.
I'm not talking about Shabbos. I'm talking about during the week. There's
That's
7 days a week, not only 1 day a week. I mean, I want to understand why you see the movie more as a distraction than your food, than your pleasure for food. I think the answer that you are thinking of, you're not expressing it, because food I need, movies I don't need.
Right.
Okay, that's true.
It's more.
But I'm not talking about your need for food. Your need for food is not a distraction for serving Hashem. The tzaddik also needs to eat. I wasn't talking about your need for food. I was talking about your pleasure and attraction for food.
You need to ask your question in a different way. If God going to come to me in the middle of the night and He's going to tell me,